everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of That Wrestling Show, the podcast where all pro wrestling matters. I'm your host, Billy Yankovi, and this week going to be talking about the WWE Hall of Fame, the class of 2021. This is a weird year for the WWE Hall of Fame for a number of reasons. The first of which is they're inducting two classes this year. The class of 2020, which was talked about last year. So I'm really not going to go through the class of 2020 again. I'm going to save you guys a lot of time and just tell you I'm not going to be talking about the class of 2020. Actually, there's going to be two parts, but the majority of the class of 2020 was talked about last year. The second thing about this year's Hall of Fame, which, again, is very weird, under very, unusual circumstances, is that the ceremonies have already been recorded. They've been taped. They're in the can. So, when the ceremony airs on Peacock this Tuesday night, that is when we're going to see it for the first time. Now, as far as who the presenters are, who's going to be inducting who, have no idea. Do not have a word. Don't have a clue about it. But what this episode does, because this is an annual tradition, the Hall of Fame episode, is we go through the entire class, look at their accomplishments, what they've done in wrestling, and ultimately, at the end, give the class of 2021 a grade. What grade does the class of 2021 deserve as a whole? Just the entire collection. Basically, how do they go? Where do they rank? Is it a good class? Is it not a good class? Have to wait and see. Now, before I get into it, the other news really going into the Hall of Fame induction, which was a first, but makes a lot of sense, is that Batista, who was originally the headliner for the class of 2020, pulled out because of scheduling conflicts. He will be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame at a future date. What date it's going to be, we don't know. Plus, he wanted to thank the fans in public, which really makes a lot of sense. I understand him, but he's very busy with his schedule. Couldn't get anything to go together, so he was the headliner for 2020. Had to pull out, but we'll see him get inducted in probably, I would venture, 2 years, 3 years, because next year's in Dallas, and I'm telling you right now, it's going to be Undertaker. Has to be Undertaker going in next year in Dallas. I could see Batista going in the Los Angeles, Hollywood WrestleMania. Okay, so now that I've explained everything, let's get into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2021. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do it in the order of when they were announced as going in. And the first person that I will be talking about is Molly Holly. Now, Molly Holly, real name Nora Greenwood, was born on September 7th, 1977, and has wrestled under many different names, including Lady Ophelia, Miss Madness, Starla Saxton, Mona, and Mighty Molly. She was trained by Dean Malenko, Dudley Dudley, not, Devon or Bubba Ray, but Dudley Dudley, and Dave Finlay, aka Fit Finlay. She made her debut on August the 2nd, 1997, and had a very good career. Her first big break was in WCW in 1999 when she was Miss Madness, one of the valets of Randy Savage, along with Medusa and Gorgeous George. Now, she would stay until about the summer of 2000 in a cost-cutting move. Later that year, in 2000, the WWF would sign her, and she would eventually debut on WWF programming as Molly Holly, the cousin of Hardcore and Crash Holly. She would go into a very interesting, a cute little dating relationship angle with Spike Dudley, which I kind of liked, to be honest. And then the Hurricane abducted her, and then she became Mighty Molly. And then after leaving the Hurricane, she became Molly Holly, and she was, like the serious, right thing to do female wrestler, and she had a really nice, lengthy career from that point on. She would wrestle in the independents. She would make brief appearances here and there, in WWE, be in the Royal Rumble this past year being one of them. But let's talk about her accomplishments. She is a two-time WWE Women's Champion, a WWF Hardcore Champion. Those are the championships she's won in WWE. She held the World Professional Wrestling Federation Women's Championship, held the New Dimension Wrestling Women's Championship, is a member of the Women Superstars Uncensored Hall of Fame class of 2010, and was the recipient of the Women's Wrestling Award from the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2013. So, despite Molly Holly having a nice career, she didn't really have a lot of championship accomplishments, but it really doesn't matter, I think, because she had such a great impact on female wrestlers as a whole. In professional wrestling, of course, the story when Beth Phoenix, went into the WWE Hall of Fame, how when Beth was trying to get trained, Molly Holly basically put her through, paid the tuition so she could go and get her dream, which I think is an amazing thing to do. Our second inductee that was announced was Eric Bischoff. Talked about him on last week's episode when we talked about the 20th anniversary of the end of World Championship Wrestling. So I'm going to do a brief look through with Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was born on May 27th, 1955, and began his professional wrestling career in 1989. Of course, he began with the AWA, working as an interviewer and a commentator, and then eventually went to WCW in 1991, where he would spend almost the next 10 years there, being a part of the NWO, basically making WCW at one point the number one wrestling promotion in the United States. In 2002, he would go to WWE, and for almost 3.5 years, would be the on-screen Night Raw. After he got fired, quote unquote, he would make guest appearances here and there. In 2010, he, along with Hulk Hogan, made their debut in TNA, and would be a part of TNA for about 4 years. And then in 2020, he would make an appearance on AEW Wrestling, would make a sporadic appearance here and there with AEW. Now, during his career, Eric Bischoff, he only won one championship, believe it or not, the WCW Hardcore Championship. Eric Bischoff, in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, won Feud of the Year twice. In 1996, he won the Feud of the Year against Vince McMahon, and in 2002, won the Feud of the Year against Stephanie McMahon. And in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, he... my goodness, this is very interesting. This is pretty cool. Won Best Gimmick, 1996 for the NWO. Won the Feud of the Year for 1996, the NWO versus WCW. And was named in 2005 the Best Non-Wrestler. So Eric, like I said, last week we talked a lot about Eric Bischoff. But I felt, this time give a little bit of a shortened look at Eric Bischoff, but not go over too much. The third person that was announced to go into the class of 2021 is Kane. Kane was born on April 26, 1967, and made his debut in 1992 after being trained by Dean Malenko, Jeff Bradley, and Ray Candy. Some of his previous gimmicks include Angus King, Bruiser Mastino, Christmas Creature, The Fake Diesel, Doomsday, Mike Unabomb, The Unabomb, and Isaac Yankem, DDS, before his more famous gimmick as Kane. So for the first 3 years of Kane's career, he traveled around territory to territory, wrestled in USWA, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, made an appearance here and there, in WCW, wrestled in Puerto Rico for World Wrestling Council, which is Carlos Colon's territory. But he got his first break in 1995 because he would become one of the more infamous gimmicks in wrestling history as Isaac Yankem, DDS, Jerry Lawler's private dentist, or you could say his personal dentist. And this was after Jerry Lawler had lost the Kiss My Foot match to Bret Hart at the King of the Ring that June. So they'd been doing for about 2 months, these vignettes of Isaac Yankem, and eventually would lead to a match at SummerSlam where Bret Hart fought Isaac Yankem. Isaac Yankem was disqualified in that match when he hung Bret Hart by twisting him in the top and middle ropes by his neck. During the rest of that time, as Isaac Yankem, he would be on a team at the Survivor Series led by Mabel, and would appear in the Royal Rumble that January, before being pulled off the air in late April, early May. But by September of that year, he would come back as Diesel. This is the gimmick where Jim Ross said that Diesel and Razor Ramon were coming back. And, well, they did, but temporarily, as we know, the fake Diesel and the fake Razor Ramon didn't really go over very well. As Diesel, Kane had two pay-per-view appearances. The first one was at In Your House It's Time, where he and Razor lost a tag team championship match to Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, and appeared in the 1997 Royal Rumble match, where Diesel was one of the last people eliminated from the match. If you go back to Eliminated, a Royal Rumble podcast, you can hear the 2 episodes of the 1997 Royal Rumble match and In Your House Final 4, where I make the argument that Diesel should have been in the main event of the February In Your House pay-per-view. But then we get into the summer of 1997, and we get probably one of the greatest angles the WWE may have ever done. Paul Bearer tells this story of Undertaker's brother, Kane, and talks about how there was an accident at the house, and Kane had died. His parents had died. Later that night, it was revealed that Kane was alive. Kane never died. He was alive. And Paul Bearer, for months, had tortured The Undertaker mentally about how Kane was coming back. And it would be happening. Because on October the 5th, 1997, at In Your House, Bad Blood, during the very first Hell in a Cell match, we get one of the greatest debuts of a character in wrestling history. Because this is the night that Kane makes his debut. He comes down in the ring, he pulls the door off its hinges, goes into the ring. Undertaker has this look on his face of shock. Kane raises his arms, brings them down, the pyro goes off, and he hits Undertaker with a tombstone. Thus begins one of the, really to me, one of the great angles of all time. Because you have this dominant monster with Kane, and you have the Undertaker. And they finally would meet at WrestleMania 14 in a pretty good match where Undertaker defeated Kane. But Kane's stock had already gone to a whole new level. During this run with Kane, it is unbelievable where he went. So many stories, so many angles that they went with. He and The Undertaker got together, became the Brothers of Destruction. He formed a team with X-Pac, had a love story with Tori. Had many different feuds with Austin, Triple H, Mankind, Rock, Big Show. You could go on and on and on. And the thing with Kane was, in a way, he was able to adapt to the times. Kind of like Undertaker. And he would go through so many different angles, so many different characters. Probably one of the more loved stories that he had would be with Daniel Bryan when they became Team Hell No, which really rejuvenated Kane's career and made one of the more popular tag teams of the last decade with Daniel Bryan. Kane was just a very for the most part, I'm not going to say the entire time, but for the most part, he was a very well-used character. And he did become the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, as Glenn Jacobs. Now, his accomplishments. Well, let's talk about the fact that he had 2 movies that he starred in. See No Evil and See No Evil 2 as Jacob Goodnight. He was also in MacGruber, the movie. He was also in the Scooby-Doo WrestleMania Mystery, which I reviewed many years ago. Who's awesome? I'm awesome. Who's awesome? I'm awesome. Who's awesome? I'm awesome. And he was in the movie Countdown in 2016. And also made a television appearance in 2007 in Smallville that year. But let's talk about his accomplishments. First, his championship accomplishments. Co-holder of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team titles with Al Snow. USWA Heavyweight Champion. Then we're getting into his entire WWE run here. WWF Champion. World Heavyweight Champion. ECW Champion. Co-holder of the WCW Tag Team titles with The Undertaker. Two-time Intercontinental Champion. Hardcore Champion. 24/7 Champion. Two-time co-holder of the WWE Tag Team titles with The Big Show and Daniel Bryan. 9-time co-holder of the WWF/WWE Tag Team titles. Twice with Mankind. Twice with X-Pac. Twice with The Undertaker. Hurricane. Rob Van Dam. And Big Show. Has won the Money in the Bank in 2010. Was the 8th Triple Crown champion in WWE and the 3rd Grand Slam champion. Also won a couple of Slammies, won the Bragging Rights trophy, which I really don't care that much about, and had this incredible, run of performances in the Royal Rumble. And the closest victory that he ever had was 2001, where he came in at the 5th or 6th position, and made it all the way to the end and almost won before being eliminated by Stone Cold Steve Austin. So now we go to our next inductee that was announced, and this is kind of interesting because he was announced the same day that Kane was, and that is the Great Khali. The Great Khali was born on August 27th, 1972, was trained by All Pro Wrestling in California, made his debut on October the 7th, 2000. His road is a very interesting road. He began in All Pro Wrestling because he was trained in All Pro Wrestling, like I mentioned. And briefly, and this is something that I didn't know until, doing research, getting ready for this, was signed to WCW, but was never used really in WCW. He wrestled in New Japan Pro Wrestling from 2001 to 2002, and then, had this run where he would go to different promotions from 2002 to 2006, wrestled in CMLL, I would love to see footage of that, and wrestled in All Japan Pro Wrestling. In 2006, he was signed by WWE and began at the developmental territory at Deep South Wrestling. He would make his debut on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 22, where he would attack The Undertaker. And this begins a weird beginning of a career for Great Khali, because within his first year in WWE, and I kid you not, folks, if you remember this like I do, I'm amazed. He worked for all 3 brands in his first year. SmackDown, ECW, and Raw. All in his first year. Of course, he was supposed to have been in the original Punjabi prison match, but because of health concerns, was replaced by The Big Show. In 2007, he won the World Heavyweight Championship in a Battle Royal and held the World Heavyweight title for a couple of months, which would lead to the second Punjabi prison match and the only one that Great Khali would ever be in, believe it or not, against Batista at No Mercy 2007. Then along the way, in 2008, the Great Khali became a babyface. And he had the Punjabi Playboy gimmick, which really worked for Great Khali and got him over, believe it or not. Got him over, and he became very popular. Of course, he would spend the rest of his years at WWE just being there, doing matches, not really doing too much, but he would be there. In 2015, Khali opened his own wrestling school in Punjab, India, Continental Wrestling Entertainment, which held its first event on December the 12th, 2015. And that is the career of the Great Khali. One thing I do want to mention, and if I don't mention this, I would probably feel a little... I'm sure people might be upset with me. There was an incident in 2001 where a gentleman by the name of Brian Ong died after receiving a flapjack wrestling move from Singh. Ong had suffered a previous concussion during the session, but the trainers gave him a lower evaluation for not avoiding injuries and told him to continue training. In addition, it was proven that Ong did not receive protective gear or supervision by APW staff, and the second concussion ultimately proved fatal for him. As Singh inadvertently caused his death, Ong's family brought a lawsuit against APW. APW was found liable for recklessness after less than a day of deliberations, awarding the family for damages of over $1.3 million. But again, Singh was inadvertently caused the death. Great Khali, like Kane, has been in movies. He was in the remake of The Longest Yard in 2005, which actually is not that bad of a movie. I'm not lying. It's not that bad of a movie. He was also in Get Smart 2008, MacGruber, Kushti, Rama the Savior, and Huba on the Trail of the Marsupilami. And he also made guest appearances on TV, Big Boss, that's big with 2 G's, Outsourced, and Pair of Kings. His championship accomplishments: was a world heavyweight champion, like I mentioned earlier. Also, 2-time Continental Wrestling Entertainment heavyweight champion. And in 2002, won the Tai-San Hall 6-man tournament in New Japan Pro Wrestling with Masahiro Chono and Giant Silva. And now the final inductee, as of this recording, announced for the WWE Hall of Fame, Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam was born on December 18th, 1970, was trained by the original Sheik, and made his wrestling debut in 1990. He wrestled under many different names, including Robbie V, Matt Byrne, and Rob Satkowski, which is his real name, before going under Rob Van. For the first few years of his career, he wrestled in different territories, place to place. Got his kind of first break in 1992, where he wrestled in WCW under the name Robbie V. Robbie V made his debut on the January 23rd, 1993 episode of WCW Saturday Night, defeating Pat Rose. The following month, Robbie V was in the tournament for the vacant WCW World Television title, where he defeated Shanghai Pierce in round 1, but lost to Vinny Vegas in the second round of the tournament. His last televised match was on May 22nd, which was an episode of WCW Saturday Night, where he lost a tag match with Eric Watts against Shanghai Pierce and Tex Slazenger. He would then go on to wrestle in many other organizations, USWA, South Atlantic Pro Wrestling, and even wrestled in All Japan Pro Wrestling, where he challenged for the Junior Heavyweight Championship on several occasions. But it would be his run in ECW that made his claim to fame. He made his debut in the summer of 1996 and defeated Axel Rotten in his debut match at House Party. Van Dam would be a very instrumental part of ECW for the rest of the time that ECW was in business. He was a part of the first ECW pay-per-view, Barely Legal. He teamed with Sabu, where on a couple of occasions they won the ECW tag team titles, and then he began one hell of a championship reign. In 1998, he defeated Bam Bam Bigelow to win the ECW, television title, and held the ECW television title for almost 2 years. Some of the men he beat or defended against include Spike Dudley, Lance Storm, Jerry Lynn, Balls Mahoney, and Too Cold Scorpio. He would have to vacate the ECW television title due to an ankle injury and never got the belt back. He was in the main event of the final ECW pay-per-view where he defeated Jerry Lynn, and as we know, ECW would shortly close a couple of weeks later. But 2001 would end up being a big year for Rob Van Dam, as he would debut in the World Wrestling Federation and be a part of the whole WWF versus the Alliance angle, where Rob Van Dam was perhaps the most popular member of the Alliance. He had his pay-per-view debut match against Jeff Hardy at Invasion, where I have said on many occasions that is the match that really solidified RVD's position in the WWF. Got him his roster really for the better. Rob Van Dam would be a big part of the Invasion angle the rest of the time. He would have another match at SummerSlam with Jeff Hardy. He would have a match with Chris Jericho at Unforgiven. And then would main event his first WWF pay-per-view at No Mercy, where he was in a triple threat match with Kurt Angle challenging Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF title. Rob Van Dam also main evented the Survivor Series, where he was on Team Alliance against Team WWF. After his run with the Hardcore title, he would go on to greater success, going for the Intercontinental title, and at his first WrestleMania 18, defeated William Regal to win the Intercontinental title. He would then go on to have a feud with a returning Eddie Guerrero, which turned into some very good matches with both men. Rob Van Dam would continue his success, teaming up with Kane in 2003, even winning the tag team titles. And from 03 to 05, he would continue to be a fixture in not only the tag team division, but the Intercontinental title division, winning both those belts during that 2 to 3 year period. Van Dam was injured in early 2005 and was out of commission, so we really didn't get to see him in much of 2005, but made his return in 2006, where he became Mr. Money in the Bank and eventually challenged John Cena for the WWE Championship at the second ever one-night stand, where he defeated John Cena to become the WWE Champion. From 2007 to 2010, he would wrestle in different promotions before going to TNA in 2010, where he became Rob Van Dam, the whole effing show. Even though he had already been that in ECW, it came back. He had that theme song, Rob Van Dam, the whole effing show. Remember that theme? Oh, that was a fun little theme. So, Rob Van Dam would have some success in TNA as well, basically going for every male championship that you could think of. X Division champion, world champion. Might have challenged for the tag titles. I don't quite remember. But Rob Van Dam would come back to WWE in 2013, would stay for a couple of years, and then would go back, do the independents, and then would go back to Impact Wrestling for a couple of years before leaving in 2020. Now, Rob Van Dam is another person who's been in movies and TV shows as well. He was on an episode of The X-Files in 2000. He was also on VIP, Spy TV. He was in the movie Black Mask 2, City of Masks. Was also in Wrong Side of Town. Was on The Family Feud in 2010. 2015 was in Three-Headed Shark Attack. I'm sure that's a lovely movie. And his final movie was 2016 Sniper Special Ops. Now to his championship accomplishments, and he does have a lot of those. Over the Top Wrestling No Limits Champion, All-Star Wrestling North American Heavyweight Champion, American Wrestling Rampage Heavyweight Champion and No Limits Champion, Battle Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, ECW World Television Champion, like I mentioned earlier, and a two-time co-holder of the ECW Tag Team titles with Sabu. Held the International Wrestling Federation Television title, the National Wrestling Council Tag Team title with Bobby Bradley, No Limits Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, Pacific Coast Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, Peach State Wrestling Cordell City Heavyweight Champion twice, South Atlantic Pro Wrestling Tag Champion with Chaz Rocco, TNA World Heavyweight Champion and X Division Champion, the World Stars of Wrestling World Champion, and then in WWF, WWE Champion, ECW Champion, 4-time Hardcore Champion, 6-time Intercontinental Champion, European Champion. Of course, with that, they merged with the Intercontinental title there. Co-holder of the WWE Tag titles with Rey Mysterio, 2-time World Tag Team Champion with Kane and Booker T. Like I mentioned, won the Money in the Bank in 2006. The 7th Grand Slam Champion in WWE history, and the 15th Triple Crown Champion in WWE. And that is the official, as of now, because, we don't know if anything's going to get added between now, by the time you hear this, and Tuesday when it airs, the class of 2021. Okay, so here's my thoughts on the class. It's a small group. I think they had a very limited time to put together a class for this year. I really, really do. When you look at some of the other classes, especially the last 10 years, they've been big classes. I think the only one that you could maybe compare this to size-wise would be 2013, where they had 5 people, and then the celebrity inductee being the future president of the United States, Donald Trump. I like Molly Holly being in. She definitely deserved to be in. Eric Bischoff, when I first heard he was going in, it was a little bit of a surprise, but I'm like, you know what? He's kind of earned it, so I'm okay with that. Kane definitely deserves to be in. Rob Van Dam, and I'm going to represent the ECW fans on this, definitely deserves to be in. The one question mark to this is Great Khali. Not the greatest wrestler of all time. Couldn't really cut a promo to save his life. But he was an attraction. There are people that are not going to agree, but he was an attraction. He was over 7 feet tall. He was, this giant of a man. I can't think anything else, to make an argument of why he shouldn't be in. He was an attraction. I mean, not like on the levels of Andre the Giant, but he was an attraction. And that's another thing with Great Khali. You know, because I do, for those listening for the first time, I work with kids. I'm a teacher's aide. Some of the kids used to ask me who would win, Great Khali or Andre the Giant, you know, or Big Show or Andre the Giant. If you get put in the same category, asking who'd win in a fight, so-and-so or Andre the Giant, not because of your height, but maybe because of your ability, you're in a good position, I think. So I'm going to give this class a 5. And again, more could be added. We don't know. I'm going to give this class a B. I think it's a lot better than last year's class because of the 5, there are 3 that definitely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Molly Holly Kane, Rob Van Dam. Eric Bischoff is, we talked about it last week. He did come up with some pretty innovative stuff. And then Great Khali is Great Khali. He's kind of like the, hey, we need one more person in there. Let's just put him in. So I'm going to give this a B. I can't think of anything really bad to say about this class. It's kind of a good class, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm going to give this a B. I think WWE did a much better job with this year's class than they did last year's. I think last year they kind of got a little lazy, you know, with having JBL go in, who is questionable if he should be in. The Bellas, who, look, I know they were going to get in at some point, but they could have waited a little bit. The NWO, which is a good induction, but, you know, at the time it was like, why isn't Bischoff going in? And then the saving graces were Davey Boy and Jushin Thunder Liger. So the class of 2021 is going to get a B grade from me. Now, this week it was announced that we would have the recipient of the Warrior Award and the celebrity inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame. And this is kind of weird because you would think, oh, they would be put in with the class of 2021. Well, they actually got put in with the class of 2020. So the recipient of the Warrior Award this last year, I guess, would be the right way to call this, is Titus O'Neil. Now, let's, first off, taking nothing away from Titus O'Neil. He is one of those guys who does unbelievable charity work for WWE. Really, really does. Stand-up guy does an unbelievable job working with charities. I got nothing against Titus O'Neil. The first reaction that a lot of fans had, and I did too, I didn't put it out publicly, you know, on social media because I let, you know, the other people do that. Why not Shad Gaspard? Why didn't Shad get the award? Well, I read recently the reason that Shad did not get this award is because Titus O'Neil, before the pandemic began, before we were all in lockdown, Titus O'Neil was going to get this award. He was going to get this award last year. But because of everything that happened, there was no Hall of Fame, no induction ceremony, so they just decided to push it back a year. And you know what? I'm actually okay with this. I do believe Shad should get this award. Maybe next year he'll get it. Maybe the year after. I don't know. But if you have somebody that you've waited, like you've had planned at that time, waiting to get this award, and then it's like, okay, we're going to give it to him, and you know, got the explanation, it's like, okay, I can live with that. So, and again, I got nothing against Titus O'Neil. I think he's an unbelievable human being. The work he's done is great. I do think he does deserve this award. So I'm fine with that. And then the celebrity wing of the WWE Hall of Fame, William Shatner going into the WWE Hall of Fame. I didn't realize this till just now. He's 90 years old. He just turned 90 years old about 2 weeks ago. They're going to obviously say because of his appearance on Monday Night Raw back in 1995 with Jerry Lawler. He had 2 appearances. That one, and then the one the following week where he was in Bret Hart's corner against Jeff Jarrett. And then that time he hosted Raw in 2010. But let's be real, folks. He's going in because of his work on Star Trek, his T.J. Hooker, which people forget, Rescue 911, which I would love to see that show come back. I mean, they're bringing shows back. Why not bring back Rescue 911? But, folks, let's be real. The main reason that William Shatner is going into the WWE Hall of Fame, the celebrity wing, is because of his musical career. Have you heard his performance of Rocket Man? My God. My God, an unbelievable performance. But no, William Shatner going in, I'm kind of like, okay. I mean, I got nothing against William Shatner. He might be a weird person, but, you know, it's William Shatner. Kind of harmless. Kind of a harmless pick to go in to the celebrity wing, unlike that one year with Kid Rock. So, they're probably like, oh, you know, we could do better than Kid Rock. Let's pick somebody harmless. Let's do William Shatner this year. But, yeah, that was an interesting choice, William Shatner going in. And that's going to do it for looking at the WWE Hall of Fame, the class of 2021. Again, if you do want to watch it, it is going to air this Tuesday night on Peacock. I want to say 7 p.m. is going to be the time. And like I said, I'm going to give you guys the heads up one more time. The Hall of Fame induction ceremony has been taped. So it's already in the can. You know, we just don't know what's going to be said, what's going to air, what's going to get cut. Going to be very interesting. Okay, let's get into the quick plugs. You can follow the show. Or actually, if you have any questions or comments, send an email. WrestlingMan@ThatWrestlingShow.com. Don't forget to follow the show on Twitter @WrestlingShow11. Follow us on Instagram @ThatWrestlingShow. Join the Facebook group. It is That Wrestling Show fan group. You type that in the search bar and boom, you are right there. And if you can't find it, it's okay. I put the link in the description of each and every episode. And if you like what you heard here and you want more content, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/That Wrestling Show. We have 3 tiers, $1, $2, and $3. $3 being the highest tier. And you get some very cool content there. That's patreon.com/That Wrestling Show. Alright, let's plug friends and podcasts that I like. Check out Our Vantage Point, the Retro Wrestling Podcast with Joe Murata and Michael Quinn. This week, they defend the Hardcore Division. Talked about the Hardcore Division earlier with Rob Van Dam and Kane. So check that out. plus the royal rankings of the best WrestleMania main events. They're getting very close to the end there. And they review the very first episode of Wrestling Challenge. That is this week on our Vantage Point, the Retro Wrestling Podcast. Also, check out Greetings from Allentown with Peter Winson. This week, he takes a break, and instead of reviewing wrestling, he reviews television. Because this week, he's reviewing an episode of The Golden Girls. That's right. It is season 2. This week, he reviews To Catch a Neighbor. That is this week on Greetings from Allentown. And check out Juice Pro Wrestling, where this week they are joined by artist Ed Luce as they discuss his art style and doing work for brands such as Image, Decibel, Heavy Metal, and his creation, The Woovable Oaf. That and much more on Juice Pro Wrestling. Now, if you're looking for non-wrestling related content, check out Last Stop Penn Station with Carrie Silken and Ian Riccaboni as they go into the life of Carrie Silken. This week, Carrie talks about Freddie the Weeper. Could be very interesting. That is this week on Last Stop Penn Station. Also, check out The Castle Vault, which is a chronological deep dive of Disney animated films powered by Disney+. They put 2 episodes up this week. They review Toy Story 3, which is my favorite of the Toy Story movies, and Volume 3 of Pixar Shorts. That's this week on the Castle Vault. Also, Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, they've reached a milestone. Their 100th episode. This week, they start a 2-parter where they interview Weird Al's best friend, Joel Miller. That is this week on Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast. Also, check out Sharks Pond, a South Park podcast where I watch and review each and every South Park episode. This week, I am still in Imagination Land. It is part 2 of Imagination Land. And finally, the brand new podcast, Bill Learns Kingdom Hearts. It's a podcast where Jimboy Star and we discuss Kingdom Hearts, and I go through 30 minutes of video and give my thoughts on the 30 of what I watched in the 30 minutes and talk about Kingdom Hearts. This week, and I want to get this pulled up real quick so I can remember. See, that's one of the fun parts about doing podcasts. But anyway, this week's episode is called This Boat Runs on Happy Faces. That is Bill Learns Kingdom Hearts. You can check that out on Spotify and iTunes. And I'll probably try to get it put up on a couple other podcast channels as well. All right, next week on this show, it is WrestleMania weekend, the biggest weekend of the year in professional wrestling. Going to preview WrestleMania 37, going to give you all my picks as to who's going to win the matches at WrestleMania, plus get into some wrestling news. Maybe talk about the induction ceremony. I might try to catch it this week, and a whole lot more. Well, thank you guys for tuning into this episode. If you celebrate Easter like I do, have a happy Easter. And if you don't, have a wonderful weekend, and come back here next week for another episode of that. Wait a minute. What are you doing here? Well, it's I, William Shatner. I just thought I'd drop by and thank the fans for supporting me all these years. William, you missed your boat like 10 minutes ago, okay? Until next time, wrestle on, everybody.